but there are so many other areas to it.
Yeah.
We're quite interested, so we thought that we will discuss all this. But of course, there's going to be a delay of a couple of weeks,
Yes, sir.
January perhaps.
Sudhir Subedar, sir, thank you for joining us, sir. We have all the panelists on board. Amit Dhawan is.
Ashish, you could join. No selling because of this event?
Just completed it yesterday, sir.
Okay.
It's a sort of OTR for me, sir.
Okay.
Praful ji, yes, sir. आपको मेल भी किया. I'll just send you by WhatsApp. I've sent you by WhatsApp also, Praful ji. I'll just do it.
ये आवाज उनको भी आती होगी.
We're live now, sir. Just gone live. We are also being streamed live on Facebook and Facebook, yeah, Facebook, and it will be recorded and kept in YouTube channel also of MRC.
Recording आप भी कर लो भाई.
We have close to 180 registrations. I hope there'll be enough people joining us. We have a very distinguished panel today and a good spectrum of people with different verticals. And we hope to try and touch upon as many aspects of this very important. With the increasing activities in the maritime domain, I think it's important that we look at multiple dimensions, and that's what we try and do in MRC. These webinars are short, about 2.5 hours kind of interaction, and we try and request domain experts, policy makers, stakeholders, and today we have representation. Thanks to Indian Coast Guard, we have a serving officer and somebody very important who is right now commanding a ship, and probably the largest ship in the Coast Guard, and also ADG Safekar sir, who has the view right from the top, and sir was in service till very recently. Then from Indian Navy, we have Johnson sir, who was also just retired from the Navy and who has got a very good spread right from the operational. I mean, he's been the navigating officer, so has a very deep understanding of the operational aspects. And then as director of Maritime History Society, has a good insight, and he is a scholar par excellence as well with a doctorate, and has been looking at maritime history from a very different perspective. We have Rajan sir from, to represent the police fraternity and who have been operationally, and sir has been right at the top DG of NSG, and now he heads a very important organization looking at security. And most important thing, sir has got such a long career and with such a wide experience. So we really look forward to benefiting from this. Pratap Heblikar, sir, has been 39 years, retired as Special Secretary, has been with that organization for a long time. He understands intelligence very well. So I think it picks up the entire thread very, very well. And most important, we have Professor Gaur, sir, the actual domain expert on forensics. I mean, we have the topic as forensics. So, Gaur sir, thank you very much for joining us. Geeta Vardhan ma'am is there. Ma'am was in ISRO. I mean, she retired as a distinguished scientist. And most importantly, ma'am has been looking at special projects in the maritime domain. She has worked with the Navy and the armed forces very, very closely. She has been instrumental in many critical projects, right from the MDA to other projects and the satellite for the Navy. So very, very important perspective coming from her. Commander Amit Dhawan looks at cyber security from a very, very I would say, I mean, in the Navy also, he was part of the Navy's team for a very long time, looking at the cyber aspect. And post Navy also almost 8 years of experience now with the industry, looking at vulnerabilities and various cyber vulnerabilities and various other things. So I think we have a very good panel today. And most importantly, to start, we have Captain Sudhir Subedar, sir. A merchant navy officer, spent a long time at sea and then in the administration, right in the DG Shipping's office and then IMO for a long time. So understands, and then post his active service, sir has been extremely active in the maritime fraternity in various capacities. The ship owners associations and various from the policy making, I think sir is one of the most sought after person. So who better than Captain Sudhir Subedar to start the event with his opening remarks? Sir, I will flash the.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, Geeta, Madam, Arnab, and all the distinguished co-panelists on this webinar today from MRC Pune. It is a privilege for Merchant Navy to interact with persons on the dais or in the panel now for very important business, which I believe requires very close interaction between the forces which govern the Indian Ocean region in particular. I particularly believe that the topic has significance for mercantile marine, as the term implies, and includes merchant navy. And therefore, I am going to speak more about the prevention of crime rather than investigation and the crime itself. It all begins with socio-economic conditions which drive the criminal activities whenever the sea areas are not frequented by their littoral states. Indian domestic shipping, Indian fishing is far too small to make an impact in Indian Ocean region. I have been advocating vibrant domestic shipping, deep sea fishing for a long time. I particularly believe that the old practices that were left behind by the colonial masters ought to have changed the scenario over last 70 years. That hasn't happened. It is only beginning in small ways now by the concepts of Sagarmala, etc., and some paperwork in terms of blue and green economy. Nothing substantial as yet. The piracy problem which prevailed and the security forces were kind enough to help the merchant shipping and particularly Indian seafarers of last few years has not altogether gone away as yet. That piracy crime and the 9/11 incident followed by the 26/11 incident requires substantial changes to primary legislation, use of technology, and various codes of practices. The ISPS code, as you would appreciate, was hurriedly put together during Atal Bihari Vajpayee's regime after the incident of the World Trade Center. I have not seen any document, any consensus arrived so hurriedly and put together a document, but it has already become obsolete and has not done what it should have been able to do in either preventing the crime of the piracy or the terrorism kind, nor it has been able to forensically decipher the crime element. IMO's initiatives in terms of AIS, LRIT, Inmarsat, GMDSS, G3, and such other technological developments have lagged behind the robust IT infrastructure that is required to make a dent in preventing the subject matter of this webinar. When the crime is committed, it ought to be easily be possible to bring the culprits to book. The Indian Anti-Piracy Act of 2019 mirrored little bit of United Kingdom, little bit of United States, without understanding the local situation. The Standing Committee report on Indian Anti-Piracy Act 2019, which has now become a bill, an act of parliament, is grossly inadequate to serve the purpose of bringing culprits to book or as a deterrent. Something more needs to be done. And therefore, I believe the outcome of such deliberations of underwater domain, maritime domain awareness, which has technical tools to use, should get leveraged by more tangible things like startups in one or two fields at least, so that there is take up from the industry side. For example, port community system 1X, now in place, is underutilized because of the concerns of cyber security. Ship reporting is not happening as it is required to happen under the IMO SOLAS Chapter 5. French, the government of France and other G7 countries see India as a very important partner in the Indian Ocean region. But there is little more to be done so that all the stakeholders are comfortable to share data, are in secure atmosphere, in secure environment of the IT infrastructure. At the moment, ship's masters are not willing to communicate unless interrogated. On the other hand, dangers of Chinese merchant ships interrogating in the Indian Ocean region is a matter of grave concern. Tapping into trade data or hacking trade data from the servers of the EIS and LRIT is something that needs to be immediately looked into by more powerful IT infrastructure. I think the topic for today, the tools that we've discussed and concepts that might come out of this deliberation, I hope we have some answers if questions are put to the panelists at the end of this program. Thank you, Arnab.
Thank you so much, sir. I think it was a very good start, and given your experience in the maritime domain, there couldn't have been a better person than you to give us the right start. I will try and talk about the maritime, the underwater domain awareness framework that we have been working on. Sorry, I'll just. Share my screen now. We at the Maritime Domain Research Center have been working on this underwater domain awareness framework. And the most important thing today is to convey the message how pooling of resources and synergizing of effort is extremely critical. I mean, and it is not just the marine environment, but we are also talking about the freshwater systems, where again, we see a significant upsurge in activities in the maritime and also in the inland waterways. So forensics, I think, becomes a very, very critical ingredient to this. And it is important that we all come together, discuss the various issues and try and find answers, as Captain Subedar sir also mentioned. And I think, to me, the digital ocean framework will bring far more transparency in such efforts to investigate crime in the maritime and also the freshwater systems. Just to give you a sense of the new global order, today the maximum maritime interactions are happening in the tropical littoral waters. I mean, the littoral term comes together with the tropical because acoustically it is considered to be even very high depths in the tropical waters are considered littoral or shallow because of the acoustic behavior there. And most important aspect that I would like to flag here is the technology that we have available to us today was largely developed in the Cold War era for the temperate and the polar region. So when we import technology today, it has very limited application or limited use in our conditions unless it is customized to our conditions. The second important issue, I mean, the Indo-Pacific region has become very, very strategically relevant, and everybody is talking about the Indo-Pacific strategic space. But if you look at it deeper, it is the tropical waters. The definition itself is the tropical waters of the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. So again, the tropical aspect becomes very, very important. And unless we understand the unique characteristics of the tropical waters, we will not be able to find solutions or will not be able to manage the challenges and opportunities that we are looking for. Today, India is being seen differently. I mean, there are a whole lot of strategic announcements, right from the Sagar vision of the Honorable Prime Minister to the mega projects to complement the big Sagar vision of the Prime Minister, whether it is Sagar Mala or Bharat Mala or various other projects. And this is encouraging both the government entities and also the private entities to be active or to deploy their strategic assets in the maritime domain and the freshwater systems. So when such high activities are there, chances of subversion or chances of crime also go up. So we have to be mindful of these aspects. And if we look at the Indian Ocean, the position of India is very, very unique. And I don't think it requires any emphasis that we have to look at ourselves as a maritime nation with the right kind of capabilities. So the domain awareness becomes very important. And now I think the most important thing I would like to flag here when we talk about any kind of development is the sustainability issues. And more activities are only throwing up such pictures where we can see a whole lot of stranding of big whales being seen in our west coast and even the east coast. I'll not go into the details of this, but how do we ensure, I mean, one is our regulations, and then how do we implement the regulations correctly? And the monitoring mechanism becomes important in the maritime domain or in the underwater domain. The maritime domain awareness term, I think we are all very familiar, and it took a lot of precedence after the 9/11 incident in the US, and then in our region after the 26/11 incident. But my worry is that it remained a security driven formulation, so the participation by the other stakeholders got highly limited. And that's when I don't think we can expect the defense budget or the security budget to fund the capacity building that is required. And the way we are trying to go out to sea for various activities, I think this is an area which requires a significant thinking, how the capacity building will be happening. The stakeholders are very well known. I think security, blue economy, environment, and disaster management in science and technology. I'm showing you some pictures of the river systems also. I mean, now more and more disruptive technologies are available, and these are available with very ease. I mean, the accessibility has become very easy. I mean, underwater robotics, even college students and school students have also got into this. So the easy availability, access of technology also raises a lot of concern. So what is our preparedness in terms of being able to investigate any kind of disruptive activity by anybody? Blue economy, there is a whole lot of activities spread across, and my worry is there are too many even ministries involved. So the synergy is quite a challenge, and how do we consolidate our capacity building effort? More the activity, more will be the problems. And you can see even in the freshwater systems also, our police forces or the security forces or anybody who is involved, do they have the right tools to be able to investigate any kind of activities or any kind of crime? We can see even, I mean, environment sustainability. I mean, we have committed to the global community, but if there are violations in terms of environmental issues, how much are we prepared to tackle those kind of issues? I mean, these are infinite possibilities, and there are so many different sectors where their activities are on the rise, and what is our preparation towards looking at it? I mean, science and technology will be a big enabler, but I also would like to warn that science and technology should not get too arrogant. I mean, we cannot replace the traditional knowledge. It should science and technology should empower us to take things forward, because what has survived traditionally for so many years has a much better rooting with the local condition. So we must not forget that aspect. And this is the framework that we have proposed, the underwater domain awareness framework. You can see all the four stakeholders represent the four sides of the cube. And I call it the horizontal construct. They may have the specific requirement of their own, but the core will remain the acoustic capacity building. As I have repeatedly flagged, the tropical waters have very different conditions. And the traditional technology development that happened during the Cold War era, the same equipment or the same technology, the degradation is close to 60 to 70%. So how will we bridge this gap is something we need to look at, and indigenous effort is extremely important. If you look at the vertical construct, a lot of sensing is required, a lot of analysis, application specific analysis, and then I think we should attempt the policy making or the regulations. Otherwise, we have been, apart from technology, we also have been importing policies. So I think there is something which we need to worry about. And if you look at the smaller cubes within the larger cube, it also represents the opportunities that it throws up. I mean, this is an area which can throw up significant career opportunities for our youngsters. And this also represents a multidisciplinary framework. I mean, if you look at the cube, right from science and technology to geopolitics to international relations, I mean, everybody has a stake in this pie, and they can definitely participate and contribute and then take away their opportunities out of this. So I think this also, I mean, I have seen among multiple, corporate bodies or even the government agencies, there is an overlap. So this actually, even for the science and technology providers or the R&D institutions, I see a lot of overlap. And how will the government manage structured policy framework? I think there is an answer in this UDA framework proposed by us. This is something we have done in terms of data analytics. The AIS data has been converted. So this kind of real-time data analytics, I think, is inescapable today. This has been done for a specific application, but such capabilities can be used across. I mean, the AIS data is available now even for the inland water transport. The river information system is being implemented. It is still work in progress, but it's a very good initiative. It needs to be probably fast-tracked, but the most important thing I would like to flag here is that unless we understand the dimensions of how this data can be used, not just for the operations on the ground, to policy making, and even for such things like forensics. I mean, we can investigate various activity. It brings a whole lot of transparency. So this is something we need to look at. And today, India can be at the forefront of such development of know-how, and we could be the leaders in the, I mean, which is what the Sagar vision aspires to do. As I said, tropical waters are very different. We need to keep track of this. So a real-time data analytics framework is very, very important. And you can see how this varies, and we can definitely bring a lot of value to the kind of investigation that is expected. I mean, a 3D model, I mean, what you see here is a 2D, and the same thing has been done for a 3D perspective. And just to give you a sense of a couple of small ideas which can be extrapolated to various other things, dark ship detection is one thing. I mean, there are multiple solutions being provided by various agencies globally. But what we have proposed is this acoustic framework, where we do a complete prediction of ship movement and the underwater noise through the AIS system. And because the tropical waters have this issue of poor sonar performance. So to mitigate that, we have built this project where the AIS data prediction will give you the complete ship presence. And if something is not painted, that is what we call the dark ship, will be easily detected by an acoustic sensor put in the region. I mean, subsurface targets, which are anyway not part of the AIS framework, or even submarines can easily be detected by this. But even there are surface ships which try and avoid detection by switching off AIS, that can be easily detected by this kind of thing. The other is shrimp mapping. So again, here is a digital framework where we can set up. And what I'm trying to say is all the stakeholders can come together. The such infrastructure can be easily built with pooling of resources and synergizing of effort, and then we can build. This can be used for various applications. I mean, there are different applications to this. Snapping shrimp, by the way, are the loudest creature underwater. They produce almost 200 dB reference 1 micropascal, whereas the blue whale produces 196 dB. So we have done these kind of mappings, and you can see So such mappings will give you a contrast. So if there is anything which is out of the usual, can easily be detected by such digital frameworks that we are talking about. So transparency, I think, is the most key factor when we look at any kind of investigation, and DigitalOcean, I think, will provide us that kind of, and ultimately the maritime governance gets enhanced. And this can be used for various, I mean, not just cyber forensics, or I mean, not just the forensics part of it, but even operationally, or even for the communities to benefit out of this and make them more, I mean, make them less vulnerable to the various factors at sea. My proposal is that a lot of awareness is required. I think stakeholders, policymakers, practitioners needs to come together. So a lot of outreach is required, and this webinar is part of one such effort. Then we need to engage, come together, find ways of, I mean, both at the lower level, where young people need to come into, or maybe lower level is not the right word, but where young people come in, understand, and try to participate into this. And the second is the higher level of policymakers who will find value in this and would make it part of the regular process of policy making or formulation of regulations. And then to sustain, I mean, how do we build infrastructure? How do we build systems which will sustain this effort in the long term, and take feedback from such systems? And probably a center of excellence may be a good idea to develop, because together we have to synergize across. So a research center with multidisciplinary research activities, incubation center to encourage, I mean, startup ecosystem, I think, is doing very well in India now and kind of coming up in the right way. So it can be, and there are a lot of initiatives by the government. So this can be a good way of crowdsourcing of innovation and ideas. And then skilling, I mean, I think the demographic advantage, this is a huge career opportunity for our young people. And then academic centers, because we in India are very conscious of academic degrees. So we have developed certain ideas, and certain modules have been approved by the regulatory authorities. And then most important is the policy center, where it gets translated into policies at multiple levels. I mean, right at the ground level to the state level, the center, and then region and the global level. That's about it from my side. And I would like to call upon my senior Amit Dhawan sir, and as I have introduced him in the earlier, in the beginning, sir has been part of the cybersecurity drive in the Navy for a long time, and even post Navy, he has been extremely active in this domain, and huge contribution to the entire cyber domain. Dhawan sir, floor is yours.
Right. Hi, good morning, good evening, everybody, depending on wherever you are. I'll just share my screen and take you through something on the cyber domain. I'll try to be as neutral, or rather as focused to the maritime direction, but happy to take anything that you feel need in this direction. So in my opinion, the technology, being agnostic, and the kind of technology and the communication systems and the IT systems being used in all those domains are same, and therefore the cyber risk and the vulnerabilities are more or less similar, if not exact. My role in the present organization, I am the global head for cybersecurity and data privacy in Birlasoft. And I've known Arnav for more than 30 years now, a fantastic colleague and a fantastic friend. And I hope I'm able to do justice for him having invited me here. So the technology trends, Mr. Satya Nadella, CEO of Microsoft, he says the tech spending as a percentage of GDP is expected to double over the next few decades, from present 5% to about 10%. That what we are looking at is about 10 trillion worth of spending by 2031. that's a huge amount. And I heard, Captain Subedar talking about it, and even Commander Arnab talking about it, that the technology is changing very fast. The technology is improving. It is becoming accessible, as Arnab mentioned, to anybody and everybody in this world. And Captain Subedar also mentioned that, there are threats that we're looking at in new technologies where we don't know how to handle them. They are being unutilized. The technology, having been made available, is unutilized because we don't know how to manage it because of the cyber threats. The World Economic Forum, talks about digital connectivity, and that is what we are looking at in all these areas. The data breaches and the identity thefts are causing a huge amount of disruptions to the operations and the critical infrastructure. All the recent reports, in the world today are quoting cyber risk as one of the top risks. From a commercial perspective, any CEO, any company CEO is afraid of that. The other risk that is coming up is privacy. Not so relevant in this, but still applicable. And once we come on to the nuances, I'll talk about them as well. Robert Mueller, earlier, FBI director, he says there are only two types of companies: those that have been hacked and those that will be. In fact, there is a twist to this statement. In my domain, we say those that have been hacked and those who do not know that they've been hacked. So, companies have been hacked, the data is being stolen. The paradigm, has changed on how the systems are being hacked. Earlier, disruption was an indication of hack. Now, the disruption is not the indicator. The indicators are successful operations, but stealing of the information which is valuable, creating chaos in a place where you wouldn't know what is happening. Like, for example, if you take hold of a ship, all digital systems, and open the sea chest valves, or if it's an oil tanker, open the drainage, you're going to cause a massive chaos for the country where it is being done. So these threats are real, these threats are live, and we need to work on them. And I'll try to explain them for this group which is available here on my understanding. Simple vision of a ship. What do you have? You have physical security. Obviously, we have communications, we have network security, we have internal crew network, we have ICS, etc., which is, electrical systems. We have loading and stability. Everything is software driven. The number of people are reducing as we speak. There is whole amount of interconnection of data between the ship as well as the controlling systems. There are a lot of updates and remote administration, and obviously navigation. And all this data does not reside internally inside the ship. The ship actively communicates with systems outside. Now, moment you have communication away from an isolated system, there is a risk of some kind of an attack happening. The attacks could be, ransomware. Say, for example, the incident that we saw in Suez Canal a couple of months back. Just imagine if that was somebody who had captured the ship remotely and said, I will not turn the ship around till the time I'm paid money. And he does it remotely. Nobody's there on the ship. You don't know where the signals are coming from. The forensics that we are talking about will take, days and weeks to decipher and make some tangible information available. By then, the amount of losses that the global economy will go through will be huge. On a lighter note, we had a movie called Speed 2. I don't know, that came about 20-25 years back, wherein a guy started controlling the engine room of a ship. We had a recent movie, Fast and Furious, where some hackers were controlling autonomous cars, which is a scary thing. And these things are available in the real world as well. Tesla went down a couple of weeks back, because the authentication of the users with the servers in Tesla was not happening. Just imagine if some hacker takes that data. And then there is a new domain called privacy, which is interlinked with cybersecurity. all this data has some meaning with respect to people, live people, and if that data gets leaked out, you have a lot of regulations these days, GDPR, etc. But the main reason of all these regulations is if this data leaks out, it can cause material harm to people in the world. And then obviously reputation. Any company that gets hacked, it is very difficult for them to regain that market value. Any country that gets hacked, it's very difficult to get that business back on track. Because of sheer reputation. In maritime domain, there is an Alliance Safety and Shipping Review. The 2021 Shipping Review spoke about an oil pipeline hack. So this is a colonial pipeline in the US. It runs from Texas all the way to New Jersey, about 5,500 miles. It supplies gas to all the states through which it is passing through. That was hacked by hackers sitting somewhere in Europe. That became such a big issue that a national emergency was declared. FBI got involved in this. They directed the CEO that it became a federal matter. They directed that ransom should not be paid and they will investigate. The company was suffering massive losses. They paid $5 million as ransom. That's an official news. Unofficially, I believe it is more than $10 million that were paid. So how did this happen? This happened because of vulnerabilities in the infrastructure, the IoT infrastructure, and the technology that we use. The business of the company was supply of gas, of oil and gas. Cybersecurity was a afterthought in that company. It was a major nightmare in that organization, in that country. That led to US coming out with a special directives of the president on sharing and collaborating of the information. Exactly as Captain Subedar was talking about, that sharing of information is not available, but I think the context was different. The context what I'm talking about is different. Hackers collaborate a lot. The thieves, in our physical domain around our houses, they collaborate information. They need help from each other, and then they go and steal from people's houses, steal different cars. They come out with systems to break the locks of the cars. The same kind of collaboration is required, as Arnab was also urging. That we need to collaborate with each other so that we are able to protect ourselves. And surprisingly, I was surprised to find an oil pipeline hack getting featured in Alliance Safety and Shipping Review. There have been few cases around this, but they haven't been noticed so much. They could be that they are isolated or that kind of awareness hasn't reached the maritime domain as yet. But that day is not that far when major damages would be surfacing because of cyber hacks. I'll talk about two more similar hacks and data breaches. The people in India would know about it: Domino's and Big Basket. What I'm trying to say is not talking about these companies, or I'm not trying to talk about how these hacks happen. What I'm trying to say is that these hacks happened on misconfiguration, poor user direction, and poor implementation of technology. The Domino's hack happened because the data that was being put on the cloud, AWS in this case, was not protected properly. It was not encrypted. We were speaking about encrypted channels earlier. Data is also that needs to be encrypted. And what did we lose? We lost credit card data of 1 million users. Now just imagine, because of similar instances, auto payment of credit cards has been stopped by the country. The same thing happened with Big Basket because somebody stored the data on cloud without the use was without authorization, the use was without authentication, and the data was unencrypted. So poor use of technology that was available misconfiguration and lack of direction in this domain were the reasons. The technology wasn't at fault. The technology did what it was supposed to do. But these losses were real. 1 million, 10 lakh people losing their credit card information is a scary thing. Moving forward, now just some things that I will feel are important in the maritime domain, which is no different from the cyber security domains that we use in the organizations or in cloud, etc. Think differently about security, about cyber security. It is not a routine thing. You need to take it a little seriously. The stakeholders need to understand technology. If you say that I'm just a navigator, or I'm just a marine biologist, or I just say that I'm it has nothing to do with me, it doesn't work like that. We all understand how our cars work. We need to understand how our technology works. Have a risk-informed approach and a zero trust philosophy. Do not trust any system to interact with any other system without a trust-based bridge connecting the two. Identify and align with regulatory compliances. I'm sure what I can understand is there are regulatory issues, regulatory requirements or standards which have been built in are more towards swifter operations and physical threats that we see, not the cyber ones. But those will come and those will be required to be followed. Connect what is relevant, whatever is essential. Every organization, there is a mandate in US for all companies dealing with the DoD and even in the RBI, in the BFSI sector, in India, in the telecom sector, there is a mandate for having cybersecurity teams and the privacy teams. You guys are leaders in your own domain. If you do not have one, I would advise that you have somebody full-time or part-time to advise on cybersecurity issues. Cybersecurity and privacy issues. It is an important area. The losses could be huge if not followed properly. Rethink on the way your systems and processes work and improve your overall posture. There are a lot of tools and technologies available. Most of them are common sense, but the implementation is something which is very, very tricky and needs to be done, considering the threats that you face in a particular domain or an organization. And last but not the least is culture. Arnab mentioned about outreach. That is nothing but culture. Culture is the most important thing in an organization. Say, I'll tell you that you can have an organization filled with security controls. You can have a house filled with all locks and keys all around you. But what if one of the person in the house opens the door for a thief to come inside? So the culture is very, very important. There has to be a culture of security by default, a culture of responsibility, awareness, a culture of inevitability. Yes, you are going to fail. I was reading about the Titanic, and it had been built over so many years that ship is unsinkable. So that culture of inevitability is very, very important. Culture of review. Do not trust anything unless it is measured. If you have a technology, measure it. If you are doing something, measure it. We have exams, we have exams to test our judgment, our knowledge. Why do we forget about exams when we grow up and we are dealing with technology? Exams are important. Culture of sustainability. You need to, maintain your system. Quoting ex-CEO of IBM, cybercrime is the greatest threat to every company in the world. My bad, I should have kept every domain in the world, but that is what it is. I'll pause here. I still have, I think, a minute. Requesting all of you to start the journey. Happy to take on any questions now or later. Please feel free to reach out in case of any questions that you may have. Arnab, back to you.
Thank you so much, sir. Definitely a different perspective, and a very, very important perspective. I mean, I think the cyber crimes in the maritime domain are on the rise, and a few of them are really scary. I mean, so, but I think the awareness, consciousness is really not what we would expect. Moving forward, I would like to request Geeta Vardhan ma'am, outstanding scientist, former director ADRIN and program director special projects at ISRO, huge experience in technology. And I would request ma'am to look at role of technology and the broad framework. Because I think India is in the next orbit now, and we have to look at things in a very holistic manner. And how do we see technology as an enabler? Ma'am, your views on that.
Thank you very much, Arnav. Good evening to all of you, or good morning, as said, we don't know from all parts of the world, people may be participating. I will just give a brief of what is in place for maritime domain awareness. I hope I'll be able to really live up to the expectations of everyone. So if we see now, technology has really transformed our lives, the way we live, the way we communicate, the way we talk to each other. Everything is technology based today. And rightly said about Mr. Anil that security plays a very, very, very important role. Cybersecurity really plays an important role. Now you see whether it's home security, or it's building security, or community security, installation security, or city roads. Everywhere we have technology in place. We have come a long way from where we were those days. Even me as a student, I know what was there, whether it's communication or surveillance or anything. And today what is in place? We have come a long way. Even you take the armed forces or the central armed police forces in our country, they have come a long way. They have really adopted to these new technologies, in the area of surveillance, in the area of communication and navigation. Of course, all of us know that Homeland Security never sleeps. It is a 24/7 operation. Be it border security, be it port security, aviation security, maritime security, cyber security, whatever it is, it cannot afford downtime or periods of reduced readiness. Now, coming to MDA per se, we all know that it is the effective understanding of the global maritime domain that impacts our security, safety, economy, environment, and the ability to generate actionable intelligence from the sea. This is all the definition I read somewhere, and I thought I should share it with you all. And what is important in all this is the real-time situation awareness. That is paramount for effectively guarding our coastal boundaries of any country for that matter. And continuous surveillance over the coastal regions and beyond is mandated for assessing and mitigation of the threats. To the extent possible, we need to be self-reliant. Towards this, what is in place so far? Let me just recap what we have put in place some time back, and today what is operational. Only the technology part I will touch upon. See, for example, we started with camera systems. Those days it was all film-based. So by the time it is processed and information is extracted, it used to take a lot of time. So it never met the real-time requirements of anybody. Whether even if it is an airborne system where we used to have cameras on board, the aircraft has to come back, process, and then see. But after the digital thing came into the existence and the computer systems, it has really made our life much, much easier. If you see today, we have infrared cameras in place digitally and day and night, so that provides you day and night vision. Then we have the radars in place, which collects information, and AIS, as already told by Arnav, AIS is also in place. But if you see all these systems that are already put in place along our coast, I think many places it has been integrated with the camera, the AIS, and the radars. But we know that the coverage is limited. It has a limitation beyond a few nautical miles, you will not be able to cover. So it is important that we go into space, and we have to see what we go into space and look down on the ground to extract actionable intelligence. So coming to that, let us see what are the things in place today. We have a number of satellites. We have communication satellites, remote sensing satellites, SAR satellites, everything in place. What has it been providing so far for us in the maritime domain? First, of course, all of us know it is satellite meteorology, which has been great and plays a really significant role in weather forecasting. That is almost totally in place, and IMD has taken over, and they are really operating everything and collecting, receiving the data, and giving the information, disseminating the information. Likewise, the satellites are also used for early warning of cyclones. We have been seeing the recent cyclone. We know when the cyclone comes, how the path of the cyclone, how it is approaching, and we are able to take advanced action so that we protect a lot of lives and also the livestock. Then these things are in place for quite some time, not yesterday or day before yesterday. This is all satellite based. We see it in the news every day. Then of we are, India is a part of the Coast Guard SARSAT program, where we have the GEO and the LEO satellites. And these payloads pick up and relay the alert signals and their location originating from the distress beacons of the maritime and the other users. We have the local users terminal. One is situated Bangalore and the other Lucknow. The moment they can receive the signal, they analyze and they send it to the respective people, the Coast Guard, shipping industry. Everybody has been benefited by this to a large extent. Now we have our own navigation constellation, the NAVIC. What is important there is we have developed indigenously a messaging receiver, which is in place, and all the fishermen are, most of them, about more than 1 lakh or 2 lakhs, I don't know the correct figure today, but they've been provided with these NAVIC receivers. And also application has been developed, Android-based application on the smartphones. They are able to receive signals on the alerts about the ocean condition, about the cyclone weather condition, and also the potential fishing zones where they can go and really catch the fishes so that they get the maximum benefit. Now, if you see all these things are in place, but this satellites really provide, as I said, a lot of information. What we have done is we have the 3-tier satellites. One is the geo-based imaging, which produces coarse resolution satellites. And then we have the LEO satellites, which are better about 23 kilometers and odd. And then we have very high resolution satellites, better than 0.5 meter resolution in place. We have a constellation of them. And how do we use it? So with this advent of this satellite-based SAIS, as it's called, we are able to integrate the AIS information onto these, we are able to detect the ships using the satellite information. We have developed the software in-house, that is a ship detection software. So we are able to identify the ships on the imagery and overlay this AIS information. We'll be able to monitor all the ships at sea. As rightly said by Adnav earlier, many ships switch off when they come, non-cooperating ships, but we will immediately know which are those and which are the ones who are operating. So this kind of information is very, very relevant to the Coast Guards, to the Navy, where they are able to see which is the one cooperating ships, which are the ones non-cooperating ships, and it gives an alert so that the people in the concerned people can take necessary action. So for the real-time situation awareness, what is important is all the satellite data, by the time it comes and we process and we put the information, there is definitely a time delay. So what is important is we should try to see, to the extent possible, minimize this time. So we have developed our own in-house embedded system based card, where real time we are able to process the data, and the data is, by the time the satellite passes over, the data is ready for analysis. Even that is not adequate, because once it is analyzed, then we overlay, we send it to respective ships or whichever party has to take action. There is a delay. So now the best way is the onboard processing. Onboard itself, all the identification, what is done on the ground, can be done on board, and we have already developed that software. It's under testing. It will be flown in the coming satellite and it will be evaluated. So onboard processing, then you get the actual situation awareness, which can be directly beamed to whichever ships which is required to be alerted. And of course, the ground system and the control center has to be known so that the overall control will be there. Now, we know that in our country today, all the units at sea have a dedicated satellite connected together. It is totally indigenous, our own satellite, and we have a security system in place so that all the information that goes across the ships, everything is very secure. And this has been cleared or by the concerned agencies. Only after that we have put it in place. So all our units at sea and even including the submarine, it has got this kind of a thing in place. Now coming to, despite all these technologies, whether it is the video camera systems, video camera, the radars or the satellite, yet it is not adequate. We see that despite all this, our Indian coastlines have always been vulnerable to anti-national activities such as smuggling of weapons, smuggling of explosives, then contraband narcotics, as well as infiltration of terrorists. We have had those experiences earlier. Hence, here I would like to say, while technology is really an enabler, it enables, it gives you a lot of information, but the current practices what are in place, like our earlier speaker told, that we should not give up all those things. We have to integrate this information with our own information, how we used to handle on ground situations earlier, then we will get the best kind of output. Apart from all this, human is very important. We cannot ignore human intelligence because they get information from somewhere. We have to take that. Many cases I have seen, whether it is ground operations or at sea, of course, I don't have experience. Ground operations I have seen, whatever the satellite imageries are provided, last moment, based on the human, the operation is totally changed. The path is changed, the way you maneuver on ground is changed, everything is changed. One thing I wanted to mention was, all this anyway, cybersecurity is very important, as already our speakers gave a very comprehensive presentation that was really very good and an eye-opener for all of us. We are aware, but we cannot lay down or just take it easy. I'll just touch upon underwater domain awareness. I mean, this is all on the maritime surface. Everything is fine. Things are in place. Yet it is not enough. We have the SAR satellites also in place, which has got a day and night vision. Ideal situation would be to host an AIS payload on the satellite so that all is integrated at one time to get the total information. And if it is on the SAR satellite, that is ideal because you have the day and night vision. That has to be done. It is all futuristic. We have to see how we go about with these things. But we do have a constellation of SAR satellites. We are able to identify the ship at night. And because of the resolution, we are able to even classify some of the ships, whatever are seen in the imagery. Now, coming to the underwater domain awareness, we know there are a number of applications, as already told by my previous speaker, but nevertheless, I'll just touch upon them. Scientific applications, industrial applications, military and homeland applications. Scientific, we know they observe the environment from geological processes, and also the water characteristics like temperature, salinity, oxygen, etc., and imaging of animals and counting of also the animals and the animal life. Industrial applications, they monitor only the control, they can monitor and control the commercial activities such as underwater equipment related to oil or mineral extraction, underwater pipelines or commercial fisheries, etc. Military and homeland applications involve security and monitoring port facilities, ships in the foreign harbors, demining and communication with submarines and divers, very important. Now coming to the type, depending on the application, the type of networks will be decided. It could be fixed or mobile, it could be short or long range, or it could be best effort basis, whatever it is. Many networks could be static network, as I said, or mobile network. Static networks will have individual nodes attached to the docks, to the anchored to the buoys, or to the sea floor. Those are it. But there are other mobile networks where we have the autonomous underwater vehicles. They go and they have their own sensor network, and they transmit to the either to the submarine or to the mainland which in turn has to come up and transmit to the other authorities. And we also have the remotely operated vehicles, which is tethered to the submarine and which has got its own sensors. It can do all this is there in underground in place. But if you see in the communication area, I have little time, like 2 minutes I'll take. Communication area, we have the acoustic systems that have been enjoying so far underwater. That is the best, owing to their ability to communicate over long distances. But here what happens, the videos that are taken by the remotely operated vehicles or the AUVs, they cannot transmit because the bandwidth is very, very less. So research is still going on in acoustic systems to improve, but that is again a long way. Its bandwidth is limited, it's got high latency, then multiple path propagation, and most importantly, they are harmful to the aquatic mammals and fishes. Now, and as I said, real-time transmission, it does not even permit because of the bandwidth. We have the RF waves, but they are also limited to shallow waters and because of high attenuation. The best is the underwater optical wireless communication. Lot of research has been done. Many systems, many people abroad have demonstrated the systems also. And what is important is they also have secure links, but we have to have our own indigenous things. That if you see, the optical communication also is absorbed by water, absorption is high, but in the blue-green band, the absorption is very less. So we use the optical communication in the blue-green band that is ideally suited for the underground communication. It has got large bandwidth, but again, the distance is limited. So we'll have to have some kind of repeaters or something. We'll have to design the network and to make sure that we are able to get what we need from wherever it is. Then what is important is, new thing what I have seen is the laser-based communication. Laser, the blue and the green laser, that is very good, and you get a larger distance, far distance than the normal optical communication, communication. So, but these are all under development. Lot of research has been done. Lot of research papers are there. I've been going through that just at least to get a knowledge myself and what can be suggested to the parties, whatever it is. But what is important everywhere, this network security is extremely important, and it has to be our own indigenous security system in place, thoroughly this thing, and we should be constantly changing that. Otherwise it can be hacked if it is not so. So it should not be one network security, one application in place. We should have a number of them and randomly keep changing so that nobody will know what is in place. That is very important from the technology point of view. Then also it is important, I would say, that while so much of technology is in place, all the stakeholders have to come together, put down the requirements, what exactly is needed. Then we can see that customized technology to meet their requirements. Well, so this is extremely important, whether it is terrestrial based or space based. It needs time for developing. So anything, if you want a satellite to go up, even if you put down the specifications today, we have to get approvals, budget, and then development. Minimum 3 years to 5 years is what it is. Totally new development takes even 5 years by the time we put it in place, put it in space, and we make it operational. So it is important that all the stakeholders, I would recommend that they all get together and put the requirements today jointly. I know that all the whatever is in place are being shared by all the stakeholders, but lots needs to be done in future. Lots needs to be done. Hence, they should come together, put it in place, and I think our MRC is doing a very good job in bringing awareness among all the people so that they know what is the need of the hour, and they'll be able to come and tell, and the scientists and the technologies can come together and put things in place. With these few words, I would like to conclude. I'm sorry I've taken 4 minutes more than the time that has been given to me. Thank you very much, Arnav, for giving me this opportunity to share my views with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I mean, I think you have given a very good technology perspective, and who better than you could have actually done this. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Right. Thank you.
We now move on to DIG Ashish Mehrotra, sir. We are very grateful to Indian Coast Guard and sir for having accepted our invite, and you bring, being the only serving officer in this group, bring the perspective of present day operational requirement. I do not expect you to share anything sensitive, but coming from you, I think gives the right authority to apprise us, and we would like to request you to talk about piracy and marine environmental crimes in the changing global order. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Anab. I hope I could be heard loud and clear. Can I be heard loud? Yeah. Well, good evening. First of all, I feel privileged to be amongst this distinguished panelists and invitees. To start with, let me put in perspective my approach to the topic, piracy and maritime environmental crimes in the changing global order. Though technically two different offshoots of the maritime law enforcement, they have some convergence in the sense that an attempted or failed piracy incident has the potential to result into a maritime environmental disaster. Having said that, the approach adopted was more of bringing forth the challenges of the two unique maritime crimes in the changing global order. If we refer to UNCLOS 82, maritime piracy is one committed for private ends and has to qualify the geographical limitations, the two-ship theory, and other parameters as defined in Article 101. While marine environmental crimes cover a large spatial dimension, including the territorial waters, influences the humanities at large, and consist of a series of action or malpractices which harmfully modify the natural equilibrium of the sea and of its wildlife. In both cases, the vastness of the sea and oceans pose similar challenges for maritime law enforcement agencies, which makes them difficult to monitor effectively. And moreover, the high seas are also subject to looser and more ambiguous system of legal regulations than many territorial waters and regions under the control of individual states. This provides an opportunity for those with malicious intent to commit acts which are against good order and environment at sea. Let me first cover briefly the issue of piracy, which has existed ever since mariners and commodities transited the oceans. If you look into the piracy incidents in Asian waters, and I'm referring to the data of Recap ISC, which has been publishing this data in their annual reports on the website, there is a considerable decline in the incidence of piracy against ships in Asia, which now stands at for 2020 just 4 incidents against a peak of 45 in 2014. Practically speaking, the action of neutralizing the pirate action groups operating off the Lakshadweep and Miniko Islands on board hijacked mother vessels Prantale 14 and Prantale 11 provided enough deterrence and the taste of Indian resolve to the East African pirates who did not dare to venture back into Indian waters. In addition, we are actively engaging with the international community through platforms like the Regional Cooperation Agreement on Combating Piracy and Armed Robbery Against Ships in Asia, that is RECAP, and the Maritime Security Center Horn of Africa, the MSC HOA as you may be knowing it, for information sharing and to identify hotspots and take appropriate actions. On the legal front, as rightly brought out by Captain Subedasa, we have made significant progress in the direction of plugging the legislative gaps in the form of Anti-Maritime Piracy Bill 2019, which is under consideration and may soon become an act. It is still under consideration. The standing committee is examining it and probably has submitted a report, and it will be again tabled to the Lok Sabha for enactment. Now, here I would like to mention that while piracy is nearly eliminated from Indian waters, and I am talking in context of Indian waters, a series of other unconventional threats have emerged owing to the latest geopolitical developments in nearby states like Afghanistan. These may result in the waters adjoining our Western EEZ being used for trafficking of opioids and human smuggling to Southeast and South Asian coastal destinations. Thus, policing the seas will remain a challenging proposition. Matters are made complex by the legislative and regulatory frameworks that administer the maritime environment. Flags of convenience vessels and phony companies hiding their true intent and purpose often make trafficking of activities more difficult. Moving on, the more prevalent issue of maritime environmental crimes. Interestingly, while searching for the definition of maritime environmental crime, I came across a research paper which defines maritime environment crime as those comprising activities that cause significant harm to the marine environment, where humans are only second order victims. Now, what invigorates is the concept of second order victims, which clearly is the reason why humans do not realize the immediate gravity of these crimes when they are committed. And the realization only creeps in when the ill effects are clearly visual upon the human race. Broadly, the most visible and emblematic example of
Ashish sir, I think you're not audible, sir. Ashish sir, you're not audible, sir. Sir, you're not audible, sir. No, sir, not. Your audio, there is a problem, sir. I think you may have to log in, log out and log in again. Yes. The slight issue with his connectivity, he's logging in again with another device.
Yeah, can you hear me now, Anab? I think
Yes,
should
we
be
can hear
audible
you.
now.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir. Go ahead, sir.
probably.
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I think we were talking about the
You are
availability.
you are at the definition of environmental crime.
Oh my God. Oh my
Thereafter,
God.
we missed everything.
Okay. So I was just talking about that, the environmental crime definition said that humans are often only the second order victims. Now, what invigorates is the concept of second order victims, which is clearly the reason why we do not realize the immediate gravity of these crimes when they are committed. And the realization only creeps in when the ill effects are clearly visual upon the human race. Broadly, the most visible and emblematic examples of maritime environmental crimes are marine pollution, fisheries crimes, and illegal mining as we know it. These crimes are impacted by the global economic scenario and are becoming more and more prominent because as the natural resource appetite of state increases, their eagerness to attain accelerated economic development, that means more and more waste is available for disposal. Evidence in case is the amount of plastic waste which was exported by US, Europe, and Australia to China prior January 2018. So I have some stats which says that around 85% of the European waste and about 35% of the Australian recyclable plastics was used to be exported to China. So it is very notable that for the high income country, shipping goods to Asia is particularly an opportune with respect to shipping to other destination, because in Asia we have a lot of production which is fed to the European and the Western countries, and we need more and more containers which would be coming into Asia for shipping these goods outwards. But sending empty containers to Asia would not allow to maximize their profits. So as a consequence, shipping lines create an incentive for European companies to export to Asia by keeping the price of transport towards Asia relatively low. Now, over the time, this has greatly encouraged the growth of exports of any kinds towards Asia, and waste exports are no exception. Indeed, shipping container of waste from Europe to Asia may be cheaper than paying for recycling costs in the European country of origin itself. So with the arrival of growing quantities of waste in Asia, recycling companies have flourished in some Asian countries, including India, thus furthering the demand of so-called raw material. So more and more demand has been raised. However, this transnational demand supply chain of plastic scrap was impacted in April 2016 when India imposed a partial ban on the plastic waste import. But the real plastic scrap trade killer were the waste import restrictions which were imposed by China and implemented in January 2018. Now, such very stringent regulations have made even small material like water bottles not eligible to be exported to China. This led to the rerouting of plastic waste exports, especially towards alternate South and Southeast Asian countries, including India. No doubt, some of this non-recyclable plastic waste finds its way into sea, either through illegal dumping or river. Now, though considerable, this effluent or solid waste dumping are not the only polluters of marine environment. Oil and petrochemical transiting through our seas to feed our energy requirements do pose a major threat to our marine environment as they are prone to spillage. Oil spills are very common and can happen anywhere oil is drilled, transported, or used. Though a majority of spills are small and can happen accidentally or intentionally, for example, during bunkering or discharge of bilges, etc., larger spills are inevitably more problematic and tend to threaten a wider marine ecosystem, both coastal and oceanic. These forms of spill may or may not be criminal depending upon the specifics of the incidents involved. Incidentally, the grave consequences and the frequency of marine oil spills in the past have ensured that a robust preventive and response system exists to mitigate and adjudicate the oil spills originating from vessels at sea. In India, besides the international instruments like International Convention on Civil Liability for Oil Pollution Damage, CLC, and the International Convention on Establishment of an International Fund for Compensation for Oil Pollution Damage, that is the fund, as amended in 1996, and the International Convention on the Civil Liability for Bunker Oil Pollution Damage, the Bunker Convention, there is a guiding regulatory mechanism put in place by DG Shipping to implement the provisions of MARPOL 7378. In addition, the Indian Coast Guard, also being the central coordinating agency for combating oil spills in various maritime zones in India, has put in place a national oil spill disaster contingency plan, which warrants oil handling agencies to maintain a minimal response capability to combat an oil spill together with dedicated pollution response teams, which are located on the west, east, and the Andaman and Nicobar coast. Now, under the aegis of NOS-DCP, various technological tools have also been identified, such as the Online Oil Spill Advisory, or USA, which has been developed by the Indian National Center for Ocean Information Services, a risk analysis and numerical modeling through National Institute of Oceanography, Goa, and several other resource agencies which contribute to fingerprinting of discarded oil, historical tracking of ships, and coastal sensitivity mapping to aid response and post-response rehabilitation of the affected environment. It is notable here that though large discharges caused by accidents are clearly established and traced to the polluter, the problem lies with the tracking of willful offenders who discharge waste oil products to sea, taking advantage of its vastness and cover of darkness. Now, in order to trace such violations, ICG is using its Dornier aircraft equipped with MSS 5000 systems to undertake reconnaissance in the sea lanes transiting through EZ. However, 100% denial of such opportunities to irresponsible vessel masters remains a challenge. Another aspect worth highlighting is that in addition to oil, the transport of hazardous and noxious substances by sea is a vital trade. Chemicals and other products underpin many manufacturing processes, and the IMO regulations ensure their safe transportation. However, incidents do happen. And presently, unlike for oil pollution, we lack a dedicated instrument to ensure that those who have suffered damage have access to a comprehensive international liability and compensation regime. Though the HNS Convention was adopted in 2010, it has still not entered into force. Hence, besides the unique challenges thrown by the response mechanism to a variety of harmful and noxious substances spilled at sea, the recovery of damages from the HNS polluter too will remain a legal challenge. Another issue is of air pollution overseas. Though we may be prepared to deal with marine oil spills on surface, our capability to control air pollutants being discharged to air overseas is limited. India, as an IMO member state, is committed to adhere to the IMO 2020 emission norms and has to ensure that flagged vessels and vessels plying in its water comply to the bunker fuel regulations, wherein since 1st of January 2020, the maximum fuel oil sulfur limit of 3.5% weight percent has fallen to half weight percent, 0.5. The DG Shipping has instituted guidelines which were promulgated in 2019 via an engineering circular and lays down the procedure for port state control. However, it is notable that as per the norms, non-compliant fuel, which is probably cheaper, could only be used if scrubber is fitted and functional. No exceptions are provided for the use of non-compliant fuel, even for emergency power generation propulsion. It would thus be a Herculean task to check compliance by all vessels plying in the Indian waters, whether visiting Indian ports or not. World over, countries are resorting to innovative measures to ensure compliance. With the aim of tightening control over ship emissions in French waters, the Ministry of Sea is deploying a sniffer drone in the Strait of Northern France. If the emission measurement taken by the drone reveal a breach in the concentration limit, a subsequent ship inspection could be undertaken at the next port of call. Now, given the gravity of the issue, existing compliance level, and the upcoming tighter norms for greenhouse gas emissions by ship, a national monitoring system needs to be devised in India too, to ensure pollution under control certifications of the vessel operating at sea outside major port limits or coasting or operating from minor ports. The national legislation will also be required to be modified to penalize the offenders proportional to the carbon emissions compromised, thus developing of resources to control maritime emissions and preserve the marine environment need to be accorded priority to meet deadlines that are approaching us faster than before. Moving on to another prominent form of marine environmental crime is that illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing. Now, as per the data available with the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, the issue of IUU fishing in the world fisheries is of serious and increasing concern. The increased appetite for seafood has led to the fishermen resorting to banned means of fishing, such as bottom trawling, pair trawling, and a very new concept which has crept in, LED fishing. If IUU fishing is not curbed, and if IUU fisher targets vulnerable stock that are subject to strict management control, efforts to rebuild those stocks to healthy levels will not be achieved. Fish landings in India have more than doubled in 2005 to 2018, and Indian waters hold more potential. However, if the increasing number of fishing boats competitively operating in the same waters is not regulated, we would experience problems in sustaining whatever remains of the fish stock, posing a grave threat to national food security in future. The impact of overfishing is already visible in the coastal areas, and an increasing number of mechanized fishing boats and trawlers are now moving farther from the coast than in the previous years in search of good catch. Management and control of these fishing vessels that are presently operating in pockets over deeper fishing grounds is considered necessary to preserve marine environment while also maintaining the livelihood of fishermen as well as reviving the coastal waters for traditional fishermen. Deep sea fishing has to be made more lucrative for the fishermen, supported by the government ashore. One scheme is the deep sea fishing vessel Park Bay Trawl Fishing Diversification Scheme, where the government provides 70% of the total cost of deep sea fishing vessels. To an extent, the government of India has been engaging itself under the umbrella of Neel Kranti mission and has already drafted a comprehensive and integrated National Fisheries Policy 2020, However, it remains to be seen how aligned the policy will be with the components of marine environment protection. Yet another environmental crime that is less prevalent now but likely to emerge in near future is one related to exploitation of deep seabed resources. Deep sea, generally considered to be beyond 200-meter depth, constitutes the largest ecosystem on Earth with vast untapped mineral resources. While exploitation of the seabed in the right earnest is yet to commence due to limitations of technology, it is evident that with the passage of time and more affordable technology, seabed resources would generate more interest, which in turn may lead to unauthorized or illegal exploitation. The very impact of even legal seabed mining also needs to be thoroughly studied before engaging. The mining methodologies have to be made environment friendly, yet economically sustainable for making them a viable option. Before I conclude, I think I would have overrun my time due to the technical disruption. I would like to bring to the forefront that any major marine environmental crime, besides having consequences for the offender, also imposes consequences for the humanity at large. We are all well aware of the loss of flora and fauna to the rising sea temperatures and the reducing green cover over Earth. However, what we need to understand is that this degradation of marine environment is taking place at a faster pace than expected. Any seagoing mariner bears testimony to the ubiquitous floating material mainly consisting of plastics at sea. Even pristine areas such as Andaman Sea and the Lakshadweep Sea are now witnessing plastic waste, mainly discharged from transiting vessels. As evident by the vastness of the oceans, establishing the identity of the polluter vessel which may have willfully discharged the waste to sea is Herculean. It is therefore important that seafarers realize their duty to the environment and self-refrain and boycott any illegal dumping of waste in the marine environment. Presently, the seas and the oceans are undeniably a cheaper alternate to land-based dumping of waste. Enforceable provisions are to be formulated to monitor and penalize the polluters even at high seas. Import of plastic waste by sea routes in the guise of recyclable raw material has to be regulated at the origin port. Though some in the industry may quote that such move may raise cost of operation and will further thin their competitive margins, resulting in economic losses. However, these monetary losses should be seen in the face of irrecoverable marine environmental losses, which will sooner have the bearing on our livelihoods if we continue to take it for granted. It is evident that maritime crimes and challenges posed by them have become more complex and need innovative approaches. While some could be tackled by individual states, others will require a multilateral approach, a regional approach, many states coming in together. In essence, closer cooperation between nation states with trans-regional linkages in intelligence, surveillance, information sharing, and capacity building, together with effective patrolling by maritime forces, would ensure cleaner oceans. On the international legal front, there is some headway gained in defining the crimes and the wanton acts against environment as ecocide. Now, thus, in future, we may see that flag states of the defaulting vessels are being tried in the International Court of Justice for overfishing or illegal discharge by their flag vessels. This could put them under the compulsion to take better charge of their flag vessels to ensure compliance with environmental protection regulations. As for us Indians, the time is ripe that each one of us realizes our duty to environment as prescribed in our Article 51 AG of Constitution, which deals with fundamental duties of the citizens and promotes all measures to preserve, protect, and rehabilitate our marine environment. Remember, we may have come a long way in bringing down the marine crimes like piracy, but lot remains to be done to deter marine environmental crimes, to protect our marine environment and preserve it for future generations. Thank you. With this, I conclude. I think I have gone beyond my time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. It was definitely a very, very comprehensive presentation, and you've really covered multiple aspects very, very effectively. Thank you so much. Now, I think this would be the most important presentation, and I would like to call upon Professor J.R. Gaur sir to talk about forensics in the modern times, challenges and opportunity. And sir is the most important domain expert in this webinar today. He is the Director of School of Forensics, Risk Management and National Security at the Rashtriya Raksha University, Gandhinagar. Professor Gaur, sir, floor is yours, sir.
Good evening to you all, sirs and madam, and dear participants. Before I come to my talk, I just want to share a few things with you. That is, I was going through a book, Evolving Dynamics of the Indian Ocean, Prospects and the Way Forward, edited by Vijay Sakhuja and Raghavendra Mishra, Shipra Publications, New Delhi, where I was going through the foreword written by Admiral R.K. Dhovan, the then Chief of Naval Staff. What he has written, a few points I am just for your information mentioning. That is, current era is the century of the seas. Thus, the maritime environment merits continuous study, discussions and debate. These are required. Indian Ocean region gaining rapidly in strategic significance. Indian Ocean is important for trade and travel by different countries. Currently, most pervasive challenges are posed by no state actors involved in piracy. Then terrorism, trafficking of drugs, arms and human beings, and fake currency are other challenges. Since no single nation is robust enough to monitor all emerging contingencies, global cooperation among nations is required for greater maritime peace and environment protection in future. With all these words, I come to my presentation. Just a minute.
అక్కడ ఎప్పుడు వదిలినా కూడా మేడం ఆ కనెక్షన్ కిందే ఉంటారు మేడం.
Am I audible, sir? Okay, thank you. This is I would say that I cannot cover up whole of forensics in this very small time, but whatsoever are the areas of concern, I'll just touch upon all those. So, forensic science, what it is, why it is required today in crime investigation, basic principles of forensic science need not be discussed in such a short time, but I'll just say forensic science tells us that what is this, why it happened, what happened, whether it happened or not, and what is the modus operandi. If it is crime, what is the modus operandi of crime? Then the body of crime. And why it is required today? Because that our traditional methods of investigation are not working today to the extent that these are required to be. As Commander Arnav has stated, we should not get away with, you can say, traditional methods in, you can say, maritime domain, or you can say, I would say in forensics also. The traditional methods of investigation are also required along with. As regard digital forensics or cyber forensics is concerned, or you can say artificial intelligence is concerned, I would say science is a double-edged sword. If you use it for constructive purposes, it is, you can say, a boon. If you use science for destructive purposes, it is a curse. On one hand, the criminals are using science and technology for the commission of crime. On the other hand, the forensic scientists, the police, the paramilitary forces, the other investigating agencies, they are using all tools and technologies of science and technology to apprehend all these criminals, to identify these criminals. Forensic science in totality, I would say, It is as old as human civilizations. It existed in one form or the other through ages. And there are three basic principles of forensic science. If I cut short, uniqueness, that is everything is unique in the universe. Then Dr. Locard's exchange principle. That is, when any two objects come in contact with each other, one object leaves something of its own to another. It applies to, you can say, when a criminal comes in contact with the victim of crime or the scene of crime, he leaves something at the scene of crime and takes away something from the scene of crime. So that is the principle behind. What is maritime forensics? I would say I know little about it. And as far as marine forensic is concerned, I suppose that what we recovered from water resources, or you can say water bodies, and what sort of crime is happening in the sea or taking place in the sea, and to investigate by forensic means, that I would say that is marine forensics. To find out certain things about the boundaries of nations, about, you can say, certain problems, as I told you, and I'll be telling in the next slides. How do we do it? That is, problems are a lot. Since when you have to deal with certain things in deep waters, we lack competence and expertise in that respect. We need to develop this domain as far as the deep waters are concerned for them. Marine environment and crime, which when we try to investigate crime in marine environment, either one cannot go to the deep seas, to the, you can say, place where certain capsized vessels are there or sunken ships are there or something, like you can say you want to investigate certain, you want to take certain other aspects. So it's very difficult process. Scientific investigations for the establishment of persons, substances, machinery and equipment, sunken ships, ferry, submarines, or other, you can say, boats, etc. Forensic investigations are needed in the coastal areas to check smuggling of NDPS, explosives, firearms, fake currency, and precious metals like gold and silver. Forensic investigations are also needed in checking spillage of crude oils or oils, industrial waste, and chemicals for protecting the sea environment. Investigations of boundary disputes in the oceans. Then investigations very difficult and time consuming, as I told you. So fire and water can easily destroy and deteriorate evidence. And undelayed quick investigations are needed, as for you can say, and the response time is required to be minimum. As you know, all biological materials are you can say degradable, or they start putrefying very early in you can say humid environment and in the environment where it is a warm and humid climate. So the response time to be taken by the investigating agency should be minimum. And for that purpose, the investigating officers should be delegated investigating officers concerned with investigations only. They do not have multifarious duties. Then sunken capsized private ships become the property of the owner companies. For investigations, their concurrence is required, which may or may not be given. And maritime forensics is needed when other evidences or investigations fail, the traditional ones, which Commander Dr. Arna was talking about. Maritime forensic in the world, in my views, is still at the threshold stage, and further development is need of the hour. What I would say here, delegated, or you can say specified laboratories should be there, either with the Indian Navy or with the Coast Guards, so that such type of crimes you can say are investigated by the designated laboratories. The examinations are carried out over there. If I talk about these narcotics, drugs and psychotropic substances, if I talk about opium, if I talk about cocaine, heroin, you can say their derivatives, or if I talk about cannabis, all plant-based drugs can be, you can say, aligned to different nations on the basis of C12 and C13, you can say, dating. Then trace elemental analysis of such drugs can identify from which area they belong to. Then I'll narrate a few cases. You can connect it with your maritime crime and maritime environmental crime. In one particular case, I'll narrate only a few cases, short, you can say briefly. In one case, miscreant threw the revolver in a, you can say, river after committing murder. Revolver recovered from the canal with high-powered magnet. Fingerprints were found present on the revolver's oily surface. Comparison of fingerprints of the suspects connected the criminal with the crime. The criminal was convicted. Second case, it was a case of terrorist activity. One woman was shot dead in the house in a town by the miscreants, that is terrorists. Another young girl was abducted by the terrorists. Her neck was cut on the bank of a running canal with a sword. Head and trunk were thrown in the running canal. Water was as deep as 8 feet and her body could not be searched, you can say in the early stages. Water in the canal was got reduced to the level of about 1.5 feet from the dam control doors. The next day search was made again. A tuft of hair was found floating in the canal water at one place. The place was approached and the head of the victim was embedded in sand was recovered. All facial features were recognizable and intact as it was winter season. The trunk of the victim was recovered 18 kilometers ahead of in the canal. Blood stains recovered from the bank of the canal. The head and the trunk were examined biologically and identity of the victim was established. And it was also established, you can say, that the blood stains, the DNA contained in all these blood stains is of the same person. The miscreants were convicted by the trial court on the basis of forensic evidence. The fault of the victims was that they did not allow the terrorists to stay in their house during night and refused to serve them food. Then the case third, dead body of a Sikh was recovered from Byas River in Himachal Pradesh. Body could not be identified for 5 days even after giving the photograph in the electronic and print media. Body was identified by superimposition of the lifetime photograph of the person with the photograph of the dead body by using video spectral comparator equipment, which is not a normal exercise in forensic sciences. It is a, you can say, very difficult exercise that you superimpose, carry out photograph to photograph superimposition. Other cases, the cases of drowning, when dry drowning is involved, problems in underwater investigations in the sea, water due to water currents, depths, and other property rights of ships and other vessels. These are difficult prepositions. Breakage oblique dents due to rolling down of the parts of the ships or these boats, etc. Whether these are accidents or otherwise. In the cases of accidents or otherwise. Soft tissues and soft parts can be expected to be intact, preserved after long lapse of time. These cannot be, you can say, expected to be preserved. You only get skeletons sometimes. And from the skeletons, we can identify whether the cut marks are ante-mortem in nature or post-mortem in nature, whether the bullet injuries are ante-mortem in nature, and what sort of weapon was used and all that. So then we can also examine from the bones the age, sex, species of origin of the person, and we can take DNA from the bone marrow and the you can say can be compared with the siblings of his parents or with the parents to identify that to establish the identity of the person. Injuries on bones, bite marks by sea animals can be identified whether post-mortem or ante-mortem in nature. Here, I would say there is Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 in India, which prohibits the killing of wild animals, various species of mammals, including sea whales and all that, and terrestrial animals. And this a list is being added every year for other animals and plant flora and fauna, you can say, and the list is being enlarged every year, and the protection given under the act, the cases can be investigated forensically, cases can be registered, and the perpetrators of such crimes can be punished. I remember, Arnav sir, you have shown certain photographs of the whales and all that. All these cases can be investigated even from their flesh. Identity of the animal can also be established even from the cooked, you can say, meat also. The identity of the animal can be established. Identity, I mean to say, whether it is whale meat or otherwise. Or regarding fishes, I cite you an example that in one particular pond, very large pond in one area, all the fishes which are contained in the pond died
You want
one day.
to pause it or you want to get out of it?
Get out of it.
So
You're going to not watch it now after I leave? So you have to get ready for Rotary.
Yeah.
hello.
I guess
So keeping all that, all those fishes were found. Hello, am I audible, sir? Hello.
We can hear you, sir. Please go ahead, sir.
All the fishes were found, you can say, dead. When the water was tested, it was found that the insecticide sprayed for weedicide sprayed in various crops, which were watered. That water came into the pond, and this fish got poisoning from that weedicide. So many cases come to us where we identify various types of cases. Same is the case with, you can say, these other animals, wild animals, whether they are poisoned or otherwise. So all these cases are identified, you can say, investigated and identified. Future works and development with respect to maritime forensics are warranted, keeping in view the disposal of human dead bodies, whether recovered from marine environment, on land or sea, as provided in the Constitution of India. Here I would say our Constitution, Indian Constitution, provides even the dead body should be disposed of in an honorable way. There should be no disregard even to the dead bodies in the country. Of late, I would say 5-6 years ago, Supreme Court of India on a writ petition filed by somebody from public interest litigation from Bihar, and they have ruled that Home Ministry Government of India should give us a proposal, or you can say way out, how the dead bodies recovered from Ganges or other rivers, they can be disposed of, you can say, honorably, and their identity is established properly. So the matter was, the Home Ministry has constituted a committee under National Crime Records Bureau, the then DGP, and it deliberated and gave reports for the establishment of certain DNA laboratories and all that, and for expansion of certain DNA facilities in certain laboratories. So keeping in view all that, I would say this is high time that such type of laboratory should be established for Indian Navy also and for Coast Guard also. Keeping in view the activities of anti-social elements, the menace of smuggling in drugs, explosives, firearms, and fake currency needs to be handled with heavy hands with the aids of forensic science and technology. Similar actions are required with respect to digital forensics. I have listened a lot from Sumit sir, and he has talked about digital forensics, or you can say its plus and minuses. But one thing I would say, that we cannot stop our cars from running on the roads, keeping in view that accidents would take place. We cannot stop our aeroplanes flying, keeping in view that there may be plane crashes. We need to, you can say, introduce technology, science and technology, with due care and attention, keeping in view that data theft, or you can say piracy, or some sort of, you can say, data stealing. All these activities, or artificial intelligence leakage, or any kind of such activities need to be, you can say, looked after while introducing new technologies. All technologies, no technology is foolproof in the world. So as I told in the beginning, science and technology is a boon when used for constructive purposes, and a curse when used for destructive purposes. A knife in the kitchen can be used for cutting vegetables, but can also be used for committing a murder. So here I would say, diamond cuts diamond. If criminals are using science and technology to commit crime, it is science and technology only which would apprehend the scientific criminals. So with all these words, thank you very much. Thanks a lot. And I'm sorry I could not say much more in such a short time. Thank you very much for inviting me, for being with you on this panel.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you very much, sir. We note down your points, and I think it's extremely valuable to take this domain forward. I would now like to request ADG Vijay Safikar, sir, who has served in the Coast Guard for over 4 decades and has significant experience in dealing with maritime crime and maritime piracy. Vijay Safikar, sir, please. Safikar, sir, you'll have to unmute yourself. I think Safikar has a issue with his connectivity. I would request Rajan sir to kindly take his time now, and whenever sir gets his connectivity sorted out, we'll get him after that. Sir, thank you very much for accepting our invite, and with your vast experience in the police force, I think you make a very, very different point in this webinar. Your time, sir, please.
Thank you, Dr. Das. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yes, sir, we can hear you, sir. Please go ahead, sir.
Right. Good evening, everybody. And it was very, very enlightening to listen to the experts in the field. And as far as I am concerned, I am to give a police view of this whole UDA framework, or the UDA framework. So I thought I will stick to the objective of the workshop. That is that a multidisciplinary experts will deliberate on the structure and scope of the proposed UDA framework and formalize the detailed strategic vision. Now, towards this objective, I will limit myself to speaking about the role and the functions of police in implementing such a framework. Before I go into the various aspects of policing of our territorial waters, I would like to touch upon some general matters that have a bearing, in my opinion, on UDA in general, and more specifically in the context of India. I will also like to touch upon some of the relevant laws that have a bearing on the role of the police in this regard. As we all know, police virtually equates to investigation, an investigation of crime. An investigation of crime today largely depends on forensics. Forensics is a field which dovetails science, that is physics, biology, chemistry, then technology, interferometry, chromatography, and the law and the legal processes into one, and thereby giving scientific investigation the fillip to produce results. As I understand it, underwater domain awareness is that aspect of maritime domain awareness that is focused on the underwater sector. And this includes sea lines of communication, coastal waters, maritime assets, etc. All these can and do draw criminal intent of forces inimical to our security, of criminals wanting to make a quick buck, and hence the need to police these national assets and resources from hostile elements and other forces. So you will see I am just referring to the police aspects every time I touch upon anything to do with UDA framework. We need to understand that defense requirement alone is not the only concern when we speak of undersea domain awareness. The well-being of our citizens and all humans and living creatures, as well as material assets that we are bound to protect from geophysical activities like underwater earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, heavy rain, are primary concerns of any government, and hence the disaster management aspect of UDA also needs to be taken into account to reduce their impact. Climate change has brought in a paradigm shift. Consequent to this climate change, we are seeing intensification of normal weather phenomena. We are having increased rains in South India now. We are having flooding. We are having drought. And this frequency also seems to be somewhat increasing, like we see in what is happening in the US. We have more tornadoes and more hurricanes happening. Police has a role there too in terms of search and rescue and disaster management. It is therefore necessary to formulate a holistic framework of UDA that takes into consideration not only the role of various agencies and departments of government and thus synergizes the effort, but more importantly, and this according to me is very important, addresses the concerns of all stakeholders for whom such framework is being developed. After all, it is a national interest that we are all looking at and how to protect it. In the 21st century, India has emerged as a major maritime nation and with a significant strategic push for maritime capability and capacity building. We heard about capacity building from the various speakers before me in terms of technology, in terms of resource, in terms of using these technologies. Now, experts and security analysts will agree that there has been a shift from continental outlook to maritime power. The growing recognition of the Indo-Pacific as a single strategic space and a formulation to counter growing Chinese dominance. I mention this specifically because China today is in the news all the time, and we, being a neighbor, are always very concerned about what is happening. To counter growing Chinese dominance in the region also recognizes India's centrality to the global influences and the increasing role of India in Americas and the European strategic calculations. I mention this because another part of policing involves surveillance and intelligence gathering. And I will touch upon this when I talk about the growing dominance of Chinese presence in these areas. My immediate reference is to Quad, but we need to be acutely aware that the underwater component of maritime domain awareness has not been given the attention it deserves, particularly in the Indian Ocean region, given our security threats that we face from this Indian Ocean and within the Indian Ocean. We should not forget the threats that are perpetuated by non-state actors. How can we forget 2611? Coming to the challenges we face, India faces several challenges and which are unique to our region. And so to achieve effective UDA, both socio-economic and science and technology-driven solutions, in addition to security formulations that are rooted in our national interest and national interest alone, are the need of the hour. Comparative diplomacy that is on display between India and China in the IOR is a measure of strategic power play in the Indo-Pacific space. We must admit that the Chinese have systematically built their underwater capabilities to not only meet their requirements, but also to export these technologies and their influence to other regional allies of India. These inroads into our traditional area of influence needs to be checked and countered effectively, lest we lose the advantage that we have enjoyed so far. This is not to say that we have done nothing or that we have not done anything to counter these inroads. The security and growth for all in the region, Sagar, declared by Prime Minister Modi, is the first major geopolitical declaration by India that asserts our leadership in the Indian Ocean region. The government of India has also announced many mega projects like Sagar Mala, Bharat Mala, inland water transport that will further the realization of our Sagar vision. In short, we have realized that maritime governance is a critical aspect that merits our focused attention to manage the surge in maritime activities on all fronts, and these fronts include policing our waters. Coming to the role of police, the civil police, by which I mean the state police, and the CAPFs, the Central Armed Police Forces, both are part of our border guarding agencies. The police exercises powers under various police acts and function within the ambit of the Criminal Procedure Code and the Evidence Act, and primarily enforce the law as it is laid down in the Indian Penal Code. This largely is their basic objective. Their role is largely preventive, which includes surveillance and intelligence gathering, but also as first responders in maintaining law and order and in conducting crime investigations. The CAPFs, especially the BSF, which I had the privilege to work in, the ITBP, the SSB, have a more direct role in border guarding. Of these, the BSF guards our borders with Pakistan and Bangladesh, and in this endeavor has its own water wing to cater to the needs of guarding the waters of the Gujarat coast, is several creeks there, and the riverine areas in the Ganga Brahmaputra deltas in the Sundarbans. After 2611, there was for the first time the realization that apart from naval patrolling of our high seas and the Navy and the Coast Guard, there was a greater need to patrol coastal waters. Coastal policing schemes, including the setting up of coastal police stations, were then introduced. As many of you would be aware, the Coastal Security Scheme, or CSS as it is called, was formulated in pursuance of recommendations of the group of ministers on reforming the national security system for setting up a marine police force in all coastal states and union territories. What were the principal objectives of this coastal security scheme? The principal objective of the coastal security scheme is to address the critical gap in policing of our coast and close coastal waters by providing the state police forces the capability to police these waters effectively. The sea, of course, forms one of our largest borders. The subject of coastal security assumes importance, and the coastal security scheme is one of the means for strengthening our ability to prevent and curb terrorist and anti-national activities. Once again, I refer to what happened in 2611. The establishment of coastal police stations, which will undertake to patrol the seas near the land boundaries, will help to prevent and curb illicit smuggling of drugs, arms, ammunition, explosives, and of infiltrators too. With this in mind, the main objectives of coastal policing were laid out to be: 1. To provide an additional line of defense in the coastline of the country, to prevent the intrusion of militants and anti-national elements into the country through the sea. 2. To prevent smuggling of petrol, diesel, medicines, illicit liquor, and other essential commodities and valuable items from the country to other countries and vice versa. 3. To prevent illegal transportation of arms and ammunition, explosives, narcotics, and also to prevent human trafficking from one country to another, particularly off the Indian coast. In this regard, I'll draw your attention to a series of such attempts that were made to smuggle Sri Lankan nationals from Sri Lanka into India and from India to Europe. This whole scheme was detected by the Kerala police, I think, sometime in the mid-90s, and it became quite a sensational case. Next, to prevent collusion between fishermen and smugglers, or militants and fishermen for committing unlawful acts on our territory. To obtain community participation in coastal security. These are all the objectives of the coastal security scheme. To collect intelligence on all of these matters, which I mentioned above, and to coordinate among related agencies like State Police, Indian Navy, Coast Guard, Fisheries Department, Customs, etc., to improve the quality of coastal policing. To help the district administration in coastal districts in disaster management. As I mentioned, police has a role in disaster management, search and rescue missions, etc. The next point, to handle law and order situations that may arise on account of clashes between various communities and groups, both onshore and offshore. In this regard, I'll refer to my experience in Kerala. Kerala has a fairly large sea coast, and as you know, fishing is a major activity on this particular region of Kerala. And we used to have several clashes between groups of fishermen of various communities and denominations, right from Trivandrum up to, I would say, Cannanore in the north. And this was a regular feature, particularly during the fishing season, where there was a competition to grab space for launching their fishermen's boats. Now you will take note of the fact that after 2011, when the coastal policing scheme in Kerala was fully established, we have not had a single incident of such a clash in Kerala. It shows the effectiveness of the CSS and one of its objectives. The next objective was to effectively impose a ban on monsoon trawling in some states and to enforce the law of the state relating to fishing, if so desired by the concerned state. Now, here again, as somebody mentioned, sea resources like fish are over farmed by our own fishermen and by foreign fishermen, and therefore there is a certain ban during the breeding season of these fish, so that the population does not decrease below a certain critical point. And lastly, to protect the maritime interests of the country by such acts as prescribed or directed by the concerned state or union territory. Now, speaking again from my experience in Kerala, we have a fairly large coastal policing wing headed by an officer of the rank of Inspector General of Police. And they could achieve the following. This is just to give you the effectiveness of a small intervention like this. By setting up coastal police stations, by training our police officers in how to manage law and order on the seas, how to detect offenses on the seas. We detected 12 Iranian nationals. This was immediately after the coastal police stations were set up near the coast of Alleppey. 12 Iranian nationals were found under suspicious circumstances within the exclusive economic zone of India, about 60 nautical miles from Alleppey coast, in a boat. These were detained and handed over to the Indian Coast Guard, who then subsequently, after interrogation, handed them back to Kerala police for registering a case and prosecuting the offenders. Another case, 11 Sri Lankan citizens were arrested by police near Cochin in the year 2015, based on information collected by coastal police and the Indian Coast Guard, while they were preparing to go to Australia illegally through the sea route. So now these two indicate the aspect of preventive policing, I would say. After all, when it comes to regions which are more than 12 nautical miles off the coast, it is the Coast Guard which has the better equipment, the better role, and in fact the major role to play. But coastal policing has helped in detecting such offences. Then, of course, there have been several search and rescue missions successfully conducted by the Kerala police with the help of fishermen. Most importantly, as I said, we have been able to engage our fishermen, take them into confidence, and use them as our extra ears and eyes for surveillance and intelligence gathering on activities in the high seas. So these people are far more familiar with the waters. Their spread is very wide, and they are able to communicate to us. And now with available technology like mobile phones and wireless sets, they are able to pass on intelligence to the local police much faster than what was happening in the past. Smuggling incidents too have been reduced, and we could get the active support of fishermen in the surveillance efforts, particularly in controlling the drug smuggling trade. We must all, of course, refer back to this famous quote that eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. And this is one way to enhance that effectiveness by using the vast spread of people, our big resources, people, and not just depend on only on technology, though of course technology has its own advantages. I may mention here that Kerala has 74 what are called Kadalora Jagrata Samitis and 2 Kayalora Jagrata Samitis to police the backwaters as well as the coasts. And our coastal patrolling has also helped rescue several fishermen when they get into trouble due to say a storm or heavy rains or their boat capsizes. With the help of the Coast Guard, Indian Coast Guard, we have also trained now a team of scuba divers in the Kerala Police Coastal Wing. And we have also acquired some FICs, fast interception craft, that have been used to intercept suspicious looking sailing vessels. Similar ways, efforts have been made in all the states. I believe in Maharashtra, they are called Sagar Prahari Bal, and similar efforts in other states. Now, coming to the legal framework, and this is where I would like to stress and draw the attention of this group. Law depends, the requirements of law are entirely different. I may detect something, I may gather evidence, but unless it is done by way of lawfully prescribed procedure, this will not be accepted as evidence in our courts, or for that matter, any court. Here comes the role of forensics, number one. And number two, to convince the judiciary of the effectiveness and reliability of these processes. We unfortunately are still lagging behind in underwater forensics, number one. Number two, we will also have to perhaps amend our Evidence Act in the manner which prescribes the manner in which evidence is to be collected. For after all, gathering evidence from the terrestrial domain is different from underwater or on the sea. Thirdly, the availability of witnesses on which our legal process depends so strongly. Our prosecution depends largely on witness statement. May not be easily available when a crime is committed on the high seas. Again, we need to look at the laws which govern our policing for these areas. Now, the IPC, as you all know, is the main act which the police implements, the Indian Penal Code, and this has a territorial jurisdiction of 12 nautical miles along our coast, which constitutes our sovereign territory, including the landmass. And this has to be read with Article 297 of our Constitution that states that all lands, minerals, and other things of value underlying the ocean within territorial waters or the continental shelf. Now, here the problem starts. The territorial waters is something, but continental shelf is far deeper, and I don't know how these areas can be effectively policed without technology. Or the exclusive economic zone of India shall vest in the Union and be held for the purpose of the Union. Now, this is a very large mandate. We'll have to really think about how such large, vast areas can be policed. We will have to use very high technology processes for this. And alongside, we will have to develop laws and legal procedures to prosecute offenses committed in these areas. The other acts, the other legal acts that police gets involved in implementing directly or indirectly by assisting other agencies are the Territorial Waters, Continental Shelf Exclusive Economic Zones, Maritime Zones Act of 1976, the Maritime Zones of India Regulation of Fishing by Foreign Vessels Act of 1981, the Merchant Shipping Act 1958. I'm just mentioning this because police had sometimes get involved in helping the other agencies when they detect offenses or violations of these acts. And here I must mention a manual which is called Maritime Crime, a manual of criminal justice practitioners. It is for criminal justice practitioners, brought out by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime in Vienna, and we are all familiar with this manual. We refer to it quite often. To conclude, I will draw your attention to one objective of the UDA framework, namely the need to formulate a holistic framework for UDA that takes into consideration not only the role of various agencies and departments of government and thus synergizes the efforts, but more importantly, addresses the concerns of all stakeholders for whom, after all, such a framework is being developed. Now, here, one more thing I would like to add is that when we talk about a framework, no framework by itself will be absolute, and this will keep on evolving as the circumstances change, as the situation changes, as we develop better and better technological equipment and scientific methods, and as the law changes. So here again, there might be a need for a monitoring sort of, I would say, a monitoring committee, which after the framework is developed, suggests continuous changes. In this, the first responders like the police, CAPFs, Coast Guard have a major role to play, but the outcome will largely depend on how well these agencies and other agencies cooperate and coordinate their activities to counter the forces inimical to us, and how we convince the stakeholders for whom we are developing this framework that this is beneficial to them. Now, without that kind of feeling coming, we are not going to get any cooperation from the general public, with the fishermen who live on the coastal areas and who have a stake in protecting these areas. With these words, I think we are running short of time, so I will conclude. Thank you very much. I hope I've been able to touch upon at least the major points where police and policing have a bearing on UDA framework. Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Definitely, sir, you made some very important points, and we do take note of them. Apart from the video, there will be a report generated, and we will be discussing with you how to take it forward. Now, I request, we are running short of time a little bit, so I'll request Vijay Safekar sir and Heblikar sir to kindly take 5 minutes each, and then I'll call the last speaker. Vijay sir, your turn, please. Sir, you'll have to unmute yourself, sir.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you, Arnav. Sorry for that disruption in between because of battery crash in my laptop. Anyway, at the outset, before I start with my comment, I would like to congratulate all the panelists and even Rajan sir for most scholarly talk, very, very enriching talk. I will keep, because of short of time, my comments brief. In the context of environmental forensic and UDA framework, I would like to talk about threat to marine environment from oil spills, which is a global concern. It is very significant because the consequences to marine environment and so also the cost of cleanup and the restoration costs are so huge, so we cannot ignore it. Each year, huge quantities of oil and petroleum products are released into undersea environment, contaminating it, and there is severe damage to the marine life, the marine resources, and the marine ecology as a whole. Now, since there are damages, there is a liability. However, in order to fix the liability, that is to make polluter pay, we have to have admissible forensic evidence. And if we see the oil residues found in the oceans, they provide certain clues about the origin. The oil fingerprinting technique, which uses certain determination of biomarkers like isotopic biomarkers, and I'm sure Professor Gaur will vouch for it, they can generate reliable and admissible forensic evidence to fix the responsibility on the polluters. And not only on the known source of pollution, even if there's an unknown spill consequences. For example, the oils discharged through the tanker traffic, they degrade and reach our shores in turning into the tar balls on our beaches. We don't know the source and we can never fix the responsibility to the source. However, if we can determine using this forensic technique, the origin or type of oil, and as long as we can prove that it was a persistent crude oil, then the international fund for oil pollution compensation, to which our oil companies contribute millions of dollars, we can claim compensation irrespective, even if we know the source or not. So that was the value I thought it can add, the environmental forensic, or at least the chemical analysis of the spilled oil and linking it to the source, known or unknown. One more point I just wanted to say that UDA framework, the relevant part was that the regulation for undersea environment, and Rajan sir just mentioned about the resources of the seabed and continental shelf and EEZ vested with the union, that actually makes a distinction between the authority of the state, jurisdiction of the coastal state, to the resources of water column, and the seaboard resources starting from the coastline to the outer limit of continental shelf vested with the union. And so also the conduct of the activity in the EEZ governed by the UN Convention on Law of Sea. That's why I was saying when we make the UDA framework, this multiple jurisdiction has to be taken into account while working on the UDA framework as far as the regulatory part is concerned. Another thing is Professor Gaur mentioned about the capability for the testing, the laboratory. And yes, I would like to be happy to share that Coast Guard pollution control vessels, which earlier had the normal laboratory, as the new vessels we are getting, we're going to have upgraded capabilities, including the capability to carry out this chemical analysis to determine the source of oil spill, to generate very reliable, admissible evidence, what we call forensic evidence. With that, I thank you. I will cut short because I know that we are limited on time, but I really enjoyed being part of this event and a great talk by all the panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. We always look forward to your encouragement, and we'll continue to engage with you while we work on the report and take things forward. Pratap Hivlikar, sir, your turn, please.
Good evening, and thank you, Arnab and my dear fellow panelists, for your excellent presentation. I think today has been a day where one could have not hoped for better gyan from subject matter experts and professionals. I think in that way, one of the objectives of today's workshop has been achieved. My association with Arnab started last year when we were doing a 4-part webinar on China. And what he said eminently when we discussed China in the maritime context drove home the fact that a lot of homework had to be done. A lot of education in quotes had to be undertaken, and a general system of information has to be established looking at this particular subject, both MDA and the UDA, in a 360-degree manner. So there were other areas which came up during that particular aspect, and like Rajan rightly said, our in the foreseeable future, China remains a long-term threat, and as long as China does not seem to not be satisfied with settling its maritime objectives, we countries like us need to be very, very careful. I was looking at a few more subjects that need to be addressed, as how do we create capacity, how do we build skill, and finally, how do we look at the induction of technology into this particular sphere. When I talk about capacity building or skills development, I also draw people's attention to some of the long-term security aspects. And one of the major events that's going to happen on India's east coast and the west coast is going to be in China coming in a greater way in the next 15-20 years, when it operationalizes the Irrawaddy corridor running to the heart of Myanmar and passing through our east coast and aside the Andaman Nicobar Islands towards the Indian Ocean. And when China operationalizes its multimodal transport corridor from Xinjiang to Gwadar, it will also have to pass through India's west coast. Needless to say, India's west coast today houses some major oil refineries of India that are in the vector of anti-national elements who could cause a lot of damages. It has not so far happened. It might happen. In the East Coast too, we have plenty of vulnerabilities that need to be addressed. The second point that I need to make is that India also needs to bring the UDA and MDA into the realization of our neighbors, especially Sri Lanka, Maldives, Seychelles, Mauritius, and Madagascar. And these are the countries today are in the forefront of Chinese domination. The visit of the French defense minister a few days ago has brought about new dimensions to our ways of looking at establishing our presence in the Indian Ocean region. And that is one area that needs to be highlighted. The second aspect was a few months ago, we had a webinar which was called as the International Monitoring the Rare Earth Market in China's Monopoly. And we realized that China will continue to do extend its influence in countries like Myanmar, which host a number of minerals just China require. And these minerals move southwards towards southeast Myanmar and towards Mon State, that is towards the southeast of Myanmar, which will create a large number of security complications for us. So I think it's time that what Arnab has started to discuss UDA, to draw our neighbors into our scheme of things so that they are also aware that threats that India faces, they are not immune to those threats as well. I think in that direction, some developments have taken place, and I'm sure that as we go along, more and more such activities will happen. For example, now we have a Quad to the east and a Quad to the west, and both seem to be in a position that will demand more Indian interaction in that direction. The third item which I was looking at on the need to enhance or increase the ambit of our education process, where our universities and our private universities take on maritime studies as one of the most important subjects that they need to understand. Because we have a university in Karnataka that is interested in conducting courses on maritime studies. There's also a university in Orissa that requires to do this. So we are looking at two different areas of operations. And I would believe that Karnataka would figure even more prominently when the military reorganization takes place in the country. And the 300 kilometer long coast will be attraction to people who seem to have inimical desires in India. Likewise, Orissa as well. The fourth point which I would like to make is that we need to bring in more of technical think tanks to look at the future. How can these think tanks, both in the privately run think tanks and government-owned think tanks, we need to look at these issues in a very, very focused way. There are offers from think tanks to fund or to bring in investment into further research into the UDA sector, and I'm sure that this can be evaluated as we go along. I run a think tank which has a MOU with the Maritime Research Center. We are trying to provide a certain amount of facilities to the MRC as far as national security considerations are concerned, and also build upon some of the expertise we have in this area. For example, this think tank of ours has provided a large number of courses to the Karnataka Coastal Police. We try to bring them up to speed as to what's happening. We have trained the Marine Prevention Wing of the Department of Customs, both in Mumbai and in Mangalore, on certain aspects of what is to be done as far as their activities are concerned. So I think as we move along, there could be a little more greater synergy. For example, Rajan mentioned about the BSF's role in border guarding activities, especially in riverine areas. the BSF has established a school in Gujarat to train people in coastal policing. And I think some of the synergies that we possess would also be part and parcel of the school, especially in the underwater surveillance and supervision systems in riverine areas where the BSF would have a advantage drawing our resources. Likewise, there are a lot of things that can be done in inland waterways where such kind of skills are required. I think my second last item that I have to discuss is that there is a need for more such workshops that need to bring in people from different walks of life, maybe make it more subject specific. Like today we had forensics, and which is a very important subject, like what Rajan rightly said, and what Dr. Gaur said. We need to focus on this as a new scheme in underwater domain awareness. And I'm sure that there are people outside who could weigh in with us and take it forward. Not the least, I think we need to synergize not only in the government, the state governments certainly require more of our skills, more of the capacity building. And last but not the least, the corporate sector, which can bring in a lot amount of synergies that we require. So I think with this few words, I do not want to cross the red line of time, but I would like to say that it has been a very enriching evening. And when I go back to my drawing board tomorrow or day after, we'll try and draw from whatever has been said here to make our training courses much more effective. And if any one of you want to partake of our journey, you are please feel welcome. Just drop in a line and we will certainly wish to collaborate with you. Thank you, Arnab, and thank you everybody for your patience.
Thank you so much, sir. Last but not the least, Commodore Dr. Johnson, sir, my shipmate, and I respect him hugely for his scholarly contributions. And I've seen him as a navigating officer at sea. So he has the real understanding of the maritime domain in the right perspective. Sir, your turn, please.
Thank you, Arnab. Trust I'm audible. And I must begin, Arnab, by dispensing a lot of protocol and formalities. And also, can I say, on the benefit of our rapport, I forgive you for making me a student for the last 3 years. I've been taking notes, even with bulleted notes, they have crossed 3 pages of a Google document. And that is just really trimmed down. And I have no intention of reading all of that out. I mean, I will try and stick to 10 minutes. What I will do is I will flag a few things, and probably, and I really wanted to do this, entire reading, Arnab, that I did was either your work or just one other. Everything else is from today's workshop. And I hope this is as summative as it gets. But let me begin with a different context. My first dive into the underwater domain or the maritime domain was in a book called Ships and the Sea, which was given to me as of today, 49 years ago, as a 7-year-old. And I didn't realize that I will finally be a part of the maritime medium at that stage, because my mom wanted to make me a doctor. Thank God she didn't. Right. The other element is a bit more later in my naval journey, and an area familiar to many of us, Suheli Par. I had a commanding officer who was more interested in going underwater than remaining on the surface. And as his navigator and pilot, he took me underwater in Suheli Par. And believe me, what I saw, that I never stopped talking about it. It's like a little child being let loose in a kindergarten with crayons and asked to describe stuff. Now you would wonder, why am I beginning with this? I mentioned that I have been learning for the last 3 years from spectacular experts today. Allow me to choose loyalty over the domain rather than the experts in the domain. And I seek your apologies right in the beginning, because I think that would be a fair collation of it. And I want to begin with this hopefully thought-provoking line. We have gathered today to talk about Okay, let me get back to my notes so that I don't go off. To talk about underwater domain awareness framework for effective forensic against marine and maritime crime investigation in the Indian Ocean region. That's quite a mouthful. And so here is my line. Man, a terrestrial animal, and I'm using it in the biological sense, is the first illegal entrant into the underwater domain. That is not where the designer created us to be. And I was very glad that someone made a mention about harm to the aquatic animals. And we shouldn't forget it. And I will come back to that in that way. The second summary that I have is there are many laments expressed very delicately and sometimes very explicitly about inadequacy of laws, not taking all stakeholders, and the challenge of tech versus usage. So allow me to go back to the basics. And I've been fortunate to hear Arnab for a long time about underwater domain and his framework. And I had to carefully listen once again. And there are many things you have mentioned, but for what Dr. Das says is the acoustic technology, I'm in failure of anything, as the central component to be brought in when you go underwater. We may desire and dream of many things, but cyber, laser, electromagnetic spectrum, radar will have to give way to sound when it comes to underwater. May we keep this somewhere at the central component of our thing. And that's why in July, when the then Vice Chief of Naval Staff, Admiral Ashok, when he talked about Navy's collaborative journey with NPOL, NIA, NIO, earlier with underwater archaeology, and Arnab has been a great supporter of marine archaeology in that entire component. So back to today's context. Here is the issue. The understanding, the technology, the usage is what I call in scientific terms fuzzy logic. It exists from 0.0 to 1.0. I'm talking of the spectrum. But decision making is always binary. It's 0 or 1. Now that is where policy, action, challenge, judgment come into challenge. Now, if it is complicated, I mean, that is what the point of scientific premise has to be dug. Let me very quickly, in about 2 to 3 minutes, take some of the things that were talked. I already talked about acoustic science as Arnab, but maybe Arnab, you could think of the various aspects of underwater domain awareness. Is there a need to demystify the framework so that the uptake at decision makers is faster? Do we need to have or spell out the gestation period in many things in the UDA framework? So need for patience. Also the desire to please all component and approach. Can we look at pilot actions and outcome? And so today when you do of marine forensics, I think that's an excellent approach and I must compliment you. When Commander Amit Dhawan talked about cyber forensics, a lot of examples, naturally he talked from the surface domain, but he mentioned a very important thing, the need for a risk-averse approach and so a zero trust, which is a standard measure for security. But then in the passing, he very nicely mentioned the need for culture, but I won't take it in the means that he mentioned. But in culture, can we look at community and non-technical stakeholders to really get the complete perspective? And I'll come back. Dr. Geeta Vardhan gave an amazing tech span across the spectrum. And I was really glad that she brought out the aquatic life aspect. And can I, from my side, add the underwater cultural heritage, which India has still not signed the convention of 2001. DIG Mehrotra compliments, amazing. This is where the practitioner comes in and he correctly talked of the, I'm not going to the piracy, the second order effects of maritime crime. So, and the challenge of evidence, regulations, this was covered later, so I'll come back to that. India has contingency plans. We will face challenges of overfishing and look forward, even if we are not engaged in deep sea resources. And he again brought about the marine environment. Professor Gore, of course, that is where the scholarly work, I am happy he started with the Century of Seas, and that basic lesson of principle of forensics, leading to maritime forensics. And I take this from you, Professor Gore, sir. We need to keep life and movement going despite apprehension of crime. Science and technology may sometimes be a bane, but it is in our hand to make it a boon. Rajan Madhekar ji as DG ISM, former DG NSG, I think brought a very good geopolitical framework to law enforcement, and he also kind of reiterated some of the things, mainly the problem of evidence, witness availability. He highlighted the need for stakeholders. He complemented the growing role of CAPF and coastal police and saying, I wish ADG Shafekar had more time, but just in that passing, talking of markers in pollutants as tool for environmental forensics, great. In Sri Pratap Heblikkar's, again reiteration, but I must just mention to you, sir, the UDA and MDA with neighborhood is already part of the trilateral dialogues, and that is being done. I cannot share more than that, but I will take the key point you have said, increased ambit into education. I was at the Gujarat Maritime University. Maritime studies need to take a central stage. So all I want to, in close, Arnav, share with you my recommendation of a framework for maritime forensics. And that's a very simple thing. 3 U's. Just because UDA, I didn't, because it's just 3 U's are very easy. First is usage has to be the primacy. In the whole process, we know when law enforcement comes, when forensic comes, the crime scene cannot be used. I want to say example of a famous hotel room that could not be used for many times because it was under investigation. Usage should be the main thing. And so if there is unauthorized usage, we need to probe. So that's the second U, understanding the unauthorized usage. And so the third word is understanding. Why am I giving these words? This will require much more amplification. You have kind of intrigued me to read and study more on that. So the 3 U's, usage, unauthorized usage, and understanding. And this will be like a continuous cycle to make it going. And in policy making, 3 M's, we need to have the few decision makers drive the mandate, the first M. The second is the mechanism requires every single stakeholder, but take specific mission-based approaches like forensics you have done today, because then that is doable. So I will close with that. There is great hope ahead. If there is one takeaway, it is that unless we get understanding of every frequency of the spectrum, it will be difficult to distinguish between night and day. Again, as I said, the full spectrum understanding is what enables the binary decision making. So I hope that helps. Maybe we can talk more. I won't share anything. This is not my sale pitch, but in marine forensics, if there is any way I can contribute at the national level, I'm quite free, national level or in the discussions, I'll be glad to. So thank you, Arnav, for the opportunity, and I hope this is helpful.
Thank you so much, sir. As I was very sure, and you really kind of connected all the dots very well. And definitely, I mean, in the report, we would be taking note of everything. And thank you very much, sir, for such a nice closing remarks. And now I would request Prafulji, our advisor, Blue Economy, to kindly propose a vote of thanks. Prafulji, kindly unmute yourself.
Hello. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much. I'd like to thank all our esteemed speakers today for a very enlightening and very insightful, thought-provoking discussion and debate. Thank you for sharing your views and your expertise in this domain. It's a domain which is huge and vast, and I'm very glad that you brought out all the facets and the nuances of this very little known domain in so many ways, actually. Thank you, all the distinguished delegates and dignitaries for your time. And I'd like to thank everyone today for this great debate and discussion. Nice to see so many familiar faces. Commodore Johnson Odakal and Chafekar sir and Pratap Heblikar sir. Thank you so much. Have a great day. In the tradition of the Navy, I've learned from Commander Das to wish that you never say good evening or now have a nice evening. You always say you have a good day. Thank you so much, everyone. Namaste.
Thank you, Praful. Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. I think it was a very good beginning, I would say. I mean, this, I think, topic got the importance that it deserved. And we would look forward to connecting with all of you. We'll work on the report, come back to you in a week or two, and then like to take this forward at a level that it can really translate into something more meaningful and contribute. And we will definitely, sir, keep in touch. And anybody who comes on the MRC webinar, we will also be projecting them as part of the UDA dialogue also. So please keep track of our website and our communications. And I must thank all of you for this excellent interaction. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arnab. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Arnab.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.